Welcome back. I hope everyone enjoyed lunch. There will be some time for more networking during our refreshment break a little later, as well as during this afternoon's reception. I think we've had a very incredible start to the day. I was wiping my tears out of my eyes during the Ignite rounds. I don't know if anybody else had that experience. Thank you, Lindy. Appreciate it. Anyway, our next session introduces new programming format for us, and we really would appreciate your feedback on it. We are thrilled to present a live podcast produced by Iron Butterfly. Today, we have a very special guest, Eman Blair, who will share her inspiring journey from Iran to the senior ranks of one of our top IC agencies. Her story, which she shared a little bit with me around a year ago, but I don't know the full story, is both powerful and motivating, and the first time she's had the opportunity to share this in public. To introduce our podcast host, please welcome Kristen Summers, Vice President and Technical Fellow, AI at Mantech. Kristen, over to you.
Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you to INSA for hosting another terrific new IC program. I'm so delighted to be doing this introduction because national security is at the heart of our focus at Mantech. And one of the ways we're supporting that mission is with AI, where we see an amazing new generation of capabilities, often spearheaded by women. Mantech is proud to have played a role in analytics and AI for the government for nearly a decade. And we're excited that this year we have introduced our new Data and AI practice, where I'm honored to lead the technical team within that practice, supporting Brandy Durham as the overall practice lead. Mantech's clients are now using analytics and AI to accelerate the discovery of system vulnerabilities, to ensure clear understanding of project status across hundreds of programs, and more generally, to do deep dives into mission challenges and the appropriate AI solutions for resolving them, and many more examples. And I should add that all of these achievements come under the reins of our Intel Sector President, Barbara Haynes-Parmela, and that 4 out of 5 of her division VPs are women. On that note, it is my honor to introduce our podcast host. Cadie Hopkins is the host of Iron Butterfly, the first podcast by and for women in the U.S. intelligence community. Cadie co-founded the Iron Butterfly podcast and Iron Butterfly Media, which is currently producing and directing the first documentary feature film about women in the intelligence community. In addition, she co-founded the Command Purpose Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit serving U.S. military veteran women and leaders throughout life transitions. Cadie is also the 2022 recipient of INSA's Joan Dempsey Mentorship Achievement Award. We are thrilled she is here today to host this live recording of the Iron Butterfly podcast. Cadie, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kristen and Suzanne. We're going to get started in just a minute, but I would love a show of hands of who is an Iron Butterfly fan in the audience. If you didn't raise your hand, I'll come find you after our episode. Welcome to the Iron Butterfly live podcast at the INSA New IC Conference. Iron Butterfly podcast was created in honor of Eloise Page, the original Iron Butterfly. 80 years ago, Eloise joined the Office of Strategic Services, trailblazing a path for what ultimately became the United States intelligence community. She rose the ranks from secretary to case officer, defying the norms of her time, and eventually became the first female chief of station at CIA. Eloise was known among her colleagues to be a fierce fighter with a core of steel, and she earned the codename Iron Butterfly. Our podcast continues her legacy, inviting the unsung heroines of the intelligence community to share their stories with aspiring leaders like you. This episode, we are joined by Eman Blair, a career civil servant whose career culminated as the chief digital officer at CIA. Eman is curious, clumsy, loves to laugh, and can't stop learning. She has 3 master's degrees and would go for more if she could. She also loves musicals, singing, travel, and tennis. And fun fact, she also loves perfume and hopes to make her own someday. Eman, welcome to Iron Butterfly.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Of course. So we have the coveted after lunch spot where everyone is about to fall asleep,
I
including
know.
our AV team. They did warn us that they might. So, Eman, we're going to start with the hardest question in the world, which is, tell us your story. And we always say, you know, we want you to go all the way back to the beginning. Like, tell us about where you grew up, tell us about your family, just kind of how that shaped you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And I know this is a very difficult time after lunch, so I'm going to try and keep it as lively as possible. And one thing that I will say is, as I mentioned, some world events, you're going to guess my age, but let's get it out there. I am retired, so you can kind of guess my age. I retired from the agency just in November. So I was born in the Middle East. I was born in Kuwait, raised in Kuwait, but I am not a Kuwaiti. I'm actually a refugee. My dad is Palestinian, my mom is Egyptian, which meant that we didn't have a country. We were referred to as stateless. We did not have any rights, really, to be honest. We had a good life in Kuwait. At least we had a place that we had shelter, at least. But there were so many things at the time that we couldn't have. We knew there are certain educational majors we couldn't be in. We couldn't travel just because there's no passport. Truly being stateless meant that nobody wanted you. And so I grew up with a lot of that. And it's funny, when you have an entire world telling you that, how much you get to believe that. You really didn't matter. You're not entitled to have this. You're not entitled to certain medical treatments. You're not entitled to certain, even schooling and education. So that was kind of inherent, and that was something in addition to the fact that, you know, back in the day, I think things are getting better right now in the Middle East for women, but back in the day, to make things even worse, I was a woman. So that meant a lot of things you couldn't even talk, you couldn't participate in activities. So that was the whole thing, but you know what, I didn't know any different. So we were going okay. Was in middle school, actually, when the terrorist attacks started to happen in Kuwait. We always knew, I grew up in the 70s, so there were all civil wars in Lebanon, you know, the Arab-Israeli conflict was still going on, and still is, but you kind of felt that was a little bit of a distant, further out from you. But then things started changing in Kuwait. In the 80s, terrorist attacks, 1983, 5 places were bombed in Kuwait at the same time. I was in school next to the French embassy, which there was an attack on that. Our American embassy was bombed then. We lost 5 people there. But this is when it started to feel real. This whole uncertainty, the whole war thing, the fact that you're no longer safe. Like, we knew that, okay, we weren't settled, but at least we were safe. But now that safety was taken away from us. And it continued to go on. I was fortunate enough that I knew that if I needed to get to any undergrad education, I had to get the best grades ever just to be given the opportunity. I'm very grateful. I made it into Kuwait University. I wanted to study engineering. I was told I couldn't study engineering because I'm stateless, which is fine, so did business school. But then did that, great years, lots of learning, enjoyed it, loved it, and then 1990, Kuwait gets invaded by Iraq. And that was really a defining moment it really felt even more what it is like to be a refugee. A lot of our friends started to leave, like people were leaving through the border, and guess what? We had no place to go. We could not go, we just had to stay there. And it was really a difficult time. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details of the occupation, maybe subject for another podcast if people really want to know what it was like. But it was really dealing with a lot of the Saddam's regime at the time. We've had family members who were taken by the regime, tortured. We've had friends, we've lost friends. And all of a sudden, it's like this sense of security. You kind of feel it's like going away, getting less and less, and you really feel like life is a gift, but you couldn't even guarantee that the next minute in time. We tried to leave at the time to go through from Kuwait into Jordan to Egypt to see if we could seek shelter. My dad was very worried. There was a lot of talk about Saddam starting to use chemical weapons in Kuwait. But that was even a worse experience because we got detained just for being Palestinians trying to leave by both Jordan and Egypt, and we got turned around 5 days before the ultimatum that George Bush had given Saddam, January 15th, to leave the country, otherwise the war is going to start. And believe it or not, this is one thing that I really want to tell people, is even though we were driving, we'd taken a public bus actually, there was like travel bus, and it was before the time that they said, everybody get off the desert roads because the war is going to start, no civilians are safe. But going back from that journey, after being turned around, being detained, it felt liberating. You know why? Because it was like, finally, we're going to go to a place that nobody wants to go, but we're going to, at least I had my dignity. Nobody was yelling at me, telling me, you can't come into this country, you guys are terrorists, you guys are awful. So turned around, went back to Kuwait 5 days before January 15th, and then the war started, and we were safe. And then after the war, I got a job as a local hire at the American Embassy in Kuwait. This was like a miracle. It was somebody in our church. He was American from the embassy, and he was taken as one of Saddam's guests when Kuwait was invaded, and then he was released, and then he came back to Kuwait to the embassy to reopen the embassy again, and asked if I would consider a job as a local hire, and that's when things shifted completely. It was so different, the treatment working at the American Embassy. I wasn't constantly reminded that I don't belong. And then, you know, it's like what happens when you're in 20s, you meet a young American. I met my husband, and that's how I came. That's how I came to the States. So I'm naturalized. And then I moved to the States, and one thing that I really wanted to do, because the one thing my dad put in my brain is you don't have a country, you don't have any rights. The one thing that can keep you going is get educated. Education. That's why I'm always like, oh, I can learn, I can get another degree. And so when I first moved to the States, I went to University of Maryland, and they said I got an MBA, and then they said you can add another degree, and I'm like, yes. So I got an MS as well. Just for the fun of it, and and that's my upbringing.
That's, I mean, such an incredible story. I think I'm struck by kind of how you describe almost being like a triple minority, right? Like you were Palestinian, yes. You were a woman, and yes. You were a refugee. Yes. And also lived through a war, right? Yeah. And I wonder how that sort of shaped your understanding of what service means, and ultimately kind of if that's what led you to the intelligence community.
The intelligence community. It did. Significantly. I think seeing human, and it's not human suffering, truly understanding the fear of war, and understanding the fear of war. I'm going to get really here a bit, any emotions, I'm okay. I'll be the first one to cry. But seeing this fear through my parents' eyes, of them trying to protect us, is what really shaped a lot of this. To see that they're really willing to put their lives on the line just to make sure that we have a good life and to protect us and we don't get hurt. I was determined at the time that I wouldn't have kids in the Middle East, whatever it took, just seeing that pain. But then I think it kind of shaped a bit of resilience, actually, of continuing to say, I can make things better. I can change things. And that's what led to service. I have to say, when 9/11 happened, my son, Josh, was a year and a half old. And I was like, oh no, he's not gonna go through what I went through. And that's what it's kind of like that instinct of I can do better. I can protect. I can make sure that the coming generations have a better life. I can even, maybe get people thinking, I'm from the Middle East, I've lived through it. Let me explain to you how these things functions in the Middle East. And that's truly what got me into the IC.
So tell us the story of how that happened. How did you end up coming to the United States? You talked about coming to the United States, meeting your American boy, and then
my American boy.
And then how did you kind of find your way into the intelligence community?
Yeah, so after getting my master's, I actually got a job for, any Booz Allen? Booz Allen? Yay! Booz Allen took a bet on me, right after my MBA program. I worked for Booz Allen, and I didn't work I wasn't supporting the IC at the time. I actually wasn't even a US citizen when I worked for Booz Allen. I was a green card holder, but I wasn't a US citizen. I had just gotten my citizenship, and then 9/11 happened. And I don't know if our Booz colleagues know that we lost 3 people at the Pentagon that day. 2 of them were from my team, so I remember seeing them at the elevator. They were going to a kickoff meeting at the Pentagon, and sadly, they did not come back. 9/11 was really, I think, like everybody, you remember that day. I remember talking to my boss. They were doing the Booz Allen assessments, which is a whole day thing. You guys remember? You still do the same thing? A whole week where you don't work. You're just doing performance evaluations. Maybe they changed it. It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
They'll suggest it when you go back to the office.
Yeah, this is how old I am. So, but it was like we were all like doing assessments, and then we heard about the plane hitting the first tower, and I mean, I went to my boss, and I'm like, I'm leaving. I don't care what's going on here at Booz. This is a terrorist attack, and part of it is like, I mean, yeah, we grew up in that culture. You're on, you know. I don't know if it's good or bad, but you know, you can almost sniff that kind of stuff. But I was like, he's like, no, we weren't sure, it's an accident. And I'm like, it could be like, you know, whatever people were thinking at the time. They didn't think it was really a terrorist attack. And I'm like, my son is in daycare. I'm gonna grab him, and I'm gonna take him home. My husband was working, he's also in the intelligence community, he retired. He was working at Langley at the time, tried to call him, and of course, nobody was answering the phone, and I just said, I'm going home to be with my son. And then things started happening, and we knew that it was a bad attack. So then, it was a very tough time for everybody, but then a lot of the agencies started saying, we need Arabic speakers. We need people who speak the language. We need people who understand the culture. And let me tell you, it was the first time in my life that being an Arab paid off. I mean, it was like, wow, I'm in demand here. So I went and applied. I remember, sorry, Booz Allen, but I was on the bench. But I went in and submitted my application for the agency, to the FBI, and also to folks up north, NSA. And I got calls like within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it's a funny story, is the agency called, they're like, come in for a polygraph. That's the first thing. I went in for an interview, and then they said polygraph, and they were moving quick. And I went first one and second one, and then and it was brutal. And then later that afternoon, I got a call from the FBI. Can you come tomorrow for a polygraph? And I'm like, no.
I think
I've done my fair share.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, it was amazing. I just got my citizenship. I got my clearances in 6 months.
Wow.
Which is, right? Right? But it tells you we have a can-do culture. We can get things done, and that's how I ended up at the agency.
Wow, what an amazing story. It also strikes me that it must have felt really unique that you could actually do something. Like you were now in a position where you actually could serve.
Yes, absolutely.
Was that your experience?
Exactly, 100%. It felt. I remember the first week of orientation we had at the agency. And everybody, like 9/11 just happened, and I mean, just to be able to like be on the front line, to be able to contribute, like finally, I'm going to do something about this. It was very empowering. I mean, later on you deal with bureaucracy, don't get me wrong, but it was at that time it felt really good. It was very, very fulfilling.
That's amazing. So, take us through some of your highlights over the course of your career, and maybe just moments that you kind of looked around and felt like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
That I really get to do this every day, and felt that sense of purpose and felt that sense of service and fulfillment that you talk about.
Well, that's a very good question, and there's so many moments like this. I think the sense of, there's so many. The one I remember most, and it kind of leads, it's kind of precursor to another event, is I remember I've always had growing up with that background. And the other thing in the agency is like I was a mid-career hire at the time, which people don't even know. Back in 2002, people didn't know what to do with mid-career hires. It's like, who are you, kind of thing, right? But it's better now. It's much better now. But it was. I was sitting in a panel. I was part of. It was an interview panel for somebody's job, and we were getting together, the panel members, before the interviews to talk about what's important, what are we looking for in the candidates and all the rest of it. But I remember all of a sudden stopping and saying, wait a minute, who's the minority up here? And I forgot it was me. And that, I went home and I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, I belong so much that I forgot that I was different. I was like with the team. I mean, doing the work, and I'm like, the imposter syndrome is gone. And that was a moment, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And I've definitely taken that with me, and it was a couple of weeks later, I was informed that I got promoted to a senior officer, which kind of was, I mean, timing was great because it just even confirmed it even more. We did a lot of, I mean, everybody in the agency and the IC, we do a lot of fun stuff. Sometimes I'm clumsy, could turn into relationships too. You go represent something and you're like, oops, I shouldn't have said that. But I think all the mission stuff is so important, and we've all done amazing things in the agency, things you never even thought that you would do, places to go that you would never thought, I'm there, no. But I think the things that really resonate is things at a personal level. And what the agency has really given me, that really stick with me. So I really, I mean, I could talk about a lot of things, fun stuff that was done, but the thing that really touches your heart, and when you're to the core, I was told I never belong anywhere. I don't have any rights. I can't go to any countries. And all of a sudden, I belong into a very amazing agency. That was a moment that I forever cherish.
I love that answer, and I think it's something that we hear a lot from the women that we interview, is that it's, of course, I mean, serving in the intelligence community, you get to serve these missions that are amazing, that others outside of this community don't get to touch, but it's really the people that make the difference in the community that make the difference and like really stick with you.
Right, absolutely, 100%.
So let's talk a little bit about maybe some challenges that you had at the agency. Is there anything that kind of comes to mind for you?
I mean, every job was a challenge, right? I mean, there are, at the end of the day, I mean, there is definitely bureaucracy that you have to overcome, right? Especially as you move up. So we all want to get promoted, and then you get, hey, like, I'm not doing the fun stuff. I have to do budget. I have to do evaluations, right? But it's, but I think with any learning, as we grow, even as whether as women, as minorities, as agency officers, there are always going to be. It's part of learning. And I think if there's a job where I wasn't challenged, I left in like 2 days. I'm like, okay, I'm bored. Like, there's nothing to do here. I've done it, right? I do have to say that, and it's not only in the agency. I think women in technology, it's a tough field. I think even in the private sector, it can be a bit challenging. We're not seen as people who can, in general, I think there's a certain stereotype. But you know, the kind of thing I think the agency allowed us to talk about it, and like events like this that help promote the understanding. I think things like that have we've been able to overcome. Challenges are also being a mom. I volunteered to a lot of task forces, and it's just those things where you have to work 24/7, sometimes around the clock. And how do, because my husband was in the same field, and if there was anything, any attack anywhere in the world, we're both gone. So what do we do with our son? And how do we, I wanted to be present. I wanted to be there, a big part of my son's life, because it's also my priority. But how do you balance these two things? That was always a challenge. But I have to say, the agency is much better about that now.
Yeah. Tell us about your son.
Oh, he's amazing. How much time do you have? Yeah. So he is, we've made a choice between, my husband and I was the one traveling. And I was the one who was there for our son. I chose jobs. This was kind of like the trade-off where I would be closer to my son location-wise. I mean, Northern Virginia is big. Some places like just commuting and traffic is a disaster. But sometimes that commute, and then I had to drop Josh off and pick him up. But I think the one thing that we have is like we've always talked about things. He did not know where I worked until he was 16, and I got promoted, so I wanted him to come to the ceremony. And he was so cute. He was like, and I'm like, Josh, I have to tell you where I work. And he was like, you? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, Mom, I thought you just did websites for the government. And I'm like, so he was, so made sure, he was there, tried to tell him at a certain level, but to a certain extent, certain things, bigger mission, what that meant. And the thing is, I didn't realize how much of a heart of service he has. I have no idea how it got to him, osmosis or just us talking around the dinner table, but when he was, right when I got promoted, he was 16, he said he wanted to be an EMT. And I'm so proud of him because it was like the hardest service. Friday night when all his friends are out partying, he volunteered to go to be an EMT. He wouldn't party and do that. Anyway, since then, that was when I realized, oh my gosh, it's in him as well. And he's now got his master's. He's a biomedical engineer, and I'm so proud of him.
Oh, that's really special.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thanks.
So you recently were awarded a Distinguished Career Intelligence Medal, which is a big deal. So round of applause for
Thank
Eman.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
So can you share with us what that means, why you received it, and why that means so much to you?
Well, thank you for that, and thanks for bringing that up. I did not expect it, and I was truly humbled. And it was a moment to reflect, also reflecting from especially where I came from, to think that I am awarded the greatest honor, the greatest medal at the CIA is truly, truly, truly humbling. Why I got it, I think I fooled people. No, I'm just joking. I really think I took up, and Larry's there looking at, he knows what I've been.
Does Larry want to answer this?
is taking on tough assignments. It's, when you have this mission focus, there's no job too big, no job too small. You just do what is needed. I was so fortunate that I was able to bring all of me to the agency, my culture, my language, my educational background, who I am as a woman, who I am as a mom, who I am as a mentor, people mentoring me, my friends. I mean, truly, and I think looking at the agency and a career in the IC as all of that, with the focus on mission, is why I think they gave me this award. I've taken a lot of difficult assignments, volunteered to a lot of task forces, whether they were mission related, not mission related, even volunteered like to teach the language if people needed it, just whatever it took. And I mean, there's certain things, certain mission things that were just where I was able to contribute. I was part of the team, which are so rewarding, and I think that's why I got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine that must have been just such a surreal moment for you.
Very much so. I mean, it's to the point where I retired in November. didn't think anything. Like, I mean, I didn't even think I was gonna get it. Like, it wasn't even on my mind. And then a week before Christmas, I get an email saying, you're a recipient of this award. And I thought it was spam. I really did. I'm like, what award? And I'm like, oh no, this is the real thing. And it was very much a moment to reflect. And it was really cute because my son, well, at the ceremony, my son wanted to speak, which that meant the world to me.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What did he say?
He made everyone cry. You're gonna make me cry. He just, he spoke a lot about how he didn't know where I worked, how at some point when I told him he was in high school, and I didn't think that mattered to him at the time, but my husband was overseas, and I had a TDY to not a very nice place, and I basically, it was our son's senior year in high school, and I basically called him, and I said, you're only child, here are the bank accounts, here's the will. And I did it so much because sometimes, I'm in technology where the zeros and ones. I'm like, this needs to be done. If my husband dies, if I die, Josh, here's the money, right? And I did it. That was all I'm thinking, is I wanted him to know he's taken care of. And that so scared him. And he mentioned that. I didn't realize how much that scared him, but years later, it finally dawned on me that that was the life we were living and the impact on him. But he was also very grateful that, which that's the part made everybody cry, is no matter how busy I was, before he went to school every day, I went and sat next to his bed and said a prayer. And that, he said that's what carried him through. Whether it's true or not, it could be emotional, I think that meant a lot to him.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful. So, you know, we have a lot of women who come on Iron Butterfly, and it's the first time that they've told their story. And I think the intelligence community is very unique, such that women operate, and men operate, really in the shadows, right? And we mean what we say in the intro. These are unsung heroes and heroines who are hard at work every day. And I'm curious for you what it's like for you to kind of share your story for the first time.
It's scary. It's weird. Yeah, I mean, we're not used to that. It's, it takes a lot. It's very different to be out in the open and talk about it. It was not how we were trained. My term of employment, couldn't even tell people where I worked until after I retired. But I think it's a story that that needs to be heard. I think there's a lot of misperceptions about the IC. But I think it's something to tell people, and especially women, to encourage them, minorities, that there are great places that we can thrive. And that's why I decided to do it, even though I have to say this still feels very uncomfortable. But it's time. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah. We talk a lot about how Hollywood has done a really good job of portraying this idea that everyone in intelligence looks the same and jumps out of moving cars and carries a gun, and intelligence has many faces.
Exactly.
And you're just one of those.
Right, exactly. No, I did not jump out of airplanes, and I didn't do that. Yes, it's a certain stereotype that they paint us all with the same brush, but we're not. And that's the beauty, and that's the strength, I think, of the IC, is everybody contributes. Everybody's from such diverse background, different strength. I mean, I have my own weaknesses, but even with the weaknesses, they help you know what they are, and help you focus on your strength. And that's what makes it very strong.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we talk a lot about, obviously we're Iron Butterfly, we talk a lot about the butterfly effect, which is kind of this idea that everything is connected, right? And every action that we take as part of this broader community has this second order, this third order, fourth order layer of impact, right? That grows and grows and grows over time.
Right.
And I'm curious for you how you see that have played out, kind of in your personal life, in your professional life, just for you.
Well, thank you. That's a tough question. You're absolutely right. It's kind of like the ripple effect, right? I think on the individual level, obviously with my family, like I said, like it's so good to see our son still have that heart of service. It feels good to see that he wants to serve in a different way. He has, oh my gosh, he is all about, I'm gonna give him a shout out here. He really wants to solve the problem of Alzheimer and dementia. If anybody has any issues, just contact. But he's taking it a mission upon himself, and that. But it's making people's lives better in a different way. And so I really, and I think that came from both my husband and myself, like this thing of being of service. We look at it more from a national security perspective. He's really looking at it from a health perspective, which is awesome. I think within my IC career, a lot of people, a lot of good friends, mentors, bosses have shaped me. Even those that I didn't necessarily agree with or they didn't like me, I'm sure that happened. But it all helps shape you for the better as you move up, as you get older. My case is like you feel that, like you can see the impact, certain things that people have said to me early on in my career that are translating to things later on in my career. I remember an amazing mentor of mine who I was taking a new position, new change, building a program. People ask why, all this kind of stuff. But the first thing, then I still have it in the back of my mind, is baby steps. Baby steps. Be patient. Baby steps. And so that impacted me. And I'm hoping that at some point I was able to mentor others, develop programs technology programs that I'm now seeing the agency build on them, laid the foundation of other things. And at a global level, it's even working with some of our partners. Working with Department of Defense was a big part of my career too. But it's like you start seeing your sphere kind of like expand as you move up. And I think that's what's amazing about a career in the IC.
Yeah, I also love, we've asked this question a few times and I've never heard anybody talk about it in the context of a career path.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a really interesting way to think about career, because oftentimes we feel like, we are just kind of like just trying to put one foot in front of the other. But it is those things that are laying a groundwork that really grows over time.
And a lot of times, like I'm sure all of us, I've done things in my career that I think I took or I was given credit for, but it wasn't me. It was like probably generations before me. And I'm sure, and I hope that we're able to pay it forward. I don't have to see the results of anything that I've done. I just trust that I've done it to the best of my ability. And I'm hoping the generation to come and others to come are going to build on it. And they're going to be more successful than I was. And I really hope that's the way it goes.
Yeah, I love that too. It's like, even if they can't see you, they see the effects of your career and your service.
Right.
So we've come to the end.
Okay.
We have the last question, which we've heard is the hardest question.
Yes.
So in keeping with the name of our podcast, Iron Butterfly, if you had to give yourself a code name, what would it be and why?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to choose, if I were to say, I'm going to choose faith. Okay. Faith is my name, Eman, is the Arabic word for faith. Okay. But I really feel throughout my life, where I came from, my journey, I mean, faith is the substance of things hoped for and evidence of things unseen, right? And I always say, if I were back in 1990, we were trying to flee for our lives out in the desert somewhere, if somebody would have told me, hang on, in a few years, 20-some years later, you're going to be a senior officer at the CIA, giving this podcast, I would have thought that they were out of their mind. But it's the evidence of things unseen. It's the evidence of keep going. There's always something better. Put your heart in the right place. Focus on your North Star. Have faith and keep going. And that's what I would say.
Amazing. Amazing. There's so many meanings to that. Well, Eman, thank you so much for trusting us,
Oh, thank
for
you.
saying yes to us, for sharing your story with everyone here and with all the women and men who are going to listen to this after you. Thank you again to INSA and Suzanne and Toya, Allie, Peggy, Travis, everybody. I'm sure I'm missing a ton of people who put this event on. There are really important conversations that happen here. So we're just
Thank you
happy
so
to
much
be a
for
part.
having me. Thank you. It's a pleasure. My pleasure, truly. Thanks.
Cadie, I just want to thank you for sharing this platform for this first ever partnership for the podcast. We hope to welcome you back again. And Eman, I know this is the first time telling your story publicly. Something tells me it will not be the last. So we're not taking a break. We're just standing up to stretch. So please, you can leave the room if you have to, but if you don't have to, don't leave the room. We're going to reset the stage and move on with our next conversation. So just hold tight if you can.
First.
Oh.